Oh, you're a doctor?
Well, not of any medical significance.
Doctor of law? Philosophy?
Which law? Whose philosophies, eh?
Oh, I see. You're determined to be mysterious.
Eh?
Doctor of science?
Septic spray, that should be all right.
A doctor of divinity, then.
You'll run out of doctors in a minute. You haven't told us your name yet.
Astrid Ferrier.
Miss Ferrier, this is Victoria, and this is Jamie.
Whoa.
Now, this won't take a minute. Just want to clean it off. Be as gentle as I can. There we are. Who are these men? Why are they so determined to kill us?
Kill you. They hate you.
Me? I'm the nicest possible person.
Oh, at least I should say they hate the person that they think you are. Passionately and completely.
Can't we tell them they made a mistake?
There wouldn't be time.
They seem remarkably dedicated.
They are.
There. Tell me, Miss Ferrier, do you hate me?
Far from it. To me, you're the most wonderful and marvelous man that's ever dropped out of the skies. Will you do something for me?
Anything at all.
It'll probably cost you your life. Oh, but it would be worth it.
Well, that's comforting anyway. What is it you want me to do?
Let me take you to the man I work for, Giles Kent. He'll explain everything you want to know.
I don't think so, Miss Ferrier.
Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always, I am joined with...
Hello, it's Scott.
Hello, Scott. This week we are looking into the second Doctor as we continue our very long. It's going to take all year for us to do this, but we are going through every Doctor chronologically. We finished the first Doctor 2 weeks ago. Last week was the news, and this week we are starting with the second Doctor, with the story The Enemy of the World. This episode we'll be covering parts 1 and parts 2. All of February we will be looking at this story because it's fucking 6 parts long. And this episode first aired on Saturday, the January 13th, 1968, which at the time of recording was a staggering 55 years and 19 days ago. At the time, the US President was Lyndon B. Johnson and the UK Prime Minister was one Harold Wilson. It was a relatively quiet day in history. As far as things go, one of the most interesting things that happened on this day was Johnny Cash performance for inmates at Folsom State Prison in Folsom, California, which is a show that ended up getting recorded for a live album release. This is a very famous album and a very famous thing that Johnny Cash did, which was pretty cool.
I've not listened to the full album, have you?
No, I think I've maybe heard like 1 or 2 songs from it, but I'm not really into Johnny Cash.
Yeah, Johnny Cash is hit and miss for me. I like some of his songs, but the rest is just garbage. Hot take.
He's not a musician that I listen to at all, but my brother really likes him.
He's good on The Simpsons.
Yeah. But who isn't good on The Simpsons? Could you guess as to what the number one... And I would be amazed if you could guess this. It's going to be hard for you all year. But could you guess what the number one movie at the box office is on this day?
The only 1968 movie I can think of is The Graduate, but I know it's not that.
It is not The Graduate, because you have to remember, this is January 1968, so the top movie came out in 1967, which was Valley of the Dolls. Valley of the Dolls, according to Wikipedia, is a 1967 American drama film starring Barbara Parkins, Patty Duke, Sharon Tate, and Susan Hayward, as well as Paul Burke and Lee Grant. It was directed by Mark Robertson and produced by David Weishart, and is based on Jacqueline Susan's 1966 novel of the same title, Valley of the Dolls. The story follows 3 women struggling to forge careers in the entertainment industry, each of them descending into barbiturate addiction, dolls being a slang term for depressant pills or downers. And I was like, this sounds like quite an interesting movie for to come out in the late 60s, like dealing with like drug abuse and people trying to build up their careers, and women as well in the 60s as well doing that. But then there was this great little article paragraph that came after this, which said, though a box office success, Valley of the Dolls received largely negative reviews from critics upon release. So,
I just looked it up. 33% on Rotten Tomatoes.
yeah. What's the consensus? Is there like a consensus on Rotten Tomatoes?
What do you mean?
Do you know if you click on it, sometimes
Right,
like they give you a little paragraph?
Trashy, campy, soapy, and melodramatic. Valley of the Dolls may be a dud as a Hollywood expose, but has nonetheless endured as a kitsch classic. So
Amazing. Sounds like a fantastic movie. Who watches Valley of the Dolls when? And that's really the only interesting things that happened on this day. But if we turn our eyes back to history, January the 13th was still a very boring day. In 532, Nika riots began in Constantinople, a revolt against the Byzantine Empire, Justinian I, that leaves half of the city burned and thousands dead. The riots were prompted by the failed execution of chariot racing supporters and only stopped after Empress Theodora refused to flee, forcing her husband to act decisively. So that, piece of history from a very long time ago. Then, just a few years later, in 1888, the National Geographic Society is founded in Washington, D.C. for the increase and diffusion of geographic knowledge. A bunch of nerds got together and said we should know more about hills. And then, in 1943, some guy called Adolf Hitler, never heard of him, declares total war against all allies, which is a pretty not chill thing to do. But that is the only things that happened on this day. That's not true. There's loads of things that happened, but those were the most interesting. It was a relatively quiet day for history so far, January 13th. But
very little happened, especially with that last one. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, never heard of him. Never such a tiny little blip in history. But why don't you take us into the writing off segment for The Enemy of the World?
This episode was written by David Whittaker, but the script editor Derek Sherwin and director Barry Letts tightened up the script to make it more action-packed and less dialogue-heavy. And that opening scene is action-packed. We'll get to that. David Whittaker was born in 1928, and he was interested in the entertainment industry from the start. He found nothing more stimulating than being involved in creating illusion, entertainment, and diversion. He only vaguely knew what he wanted to do within the industry, and became a jack of all trades during the 50s. He was a writer, producer, director, and actor, but he soon found the lifestyle he wanted to be the most. He joined the BBC as a staff writer and story editor in late 1957 after his stage play A Choice of Partners was bought by the BBC. He would describe his first few years as extremely hard but gratifying work. Soon he began to gain a reputation within the BBC as he was seen as an excellent writer and proficient script editor. The higher-ups considered him to be a perfect fit for a new Saturday tea-time family drama, and so David Whittaker became the first script editor for the first 10 stories of Doctor Who, totaling 52 episodes in a year, which is...
Jesus, that's so much.
Yeah, just thinking about the scale of how many episodes they produced in terms of a year is just insane. 52 episodes.
Yeah. Christ.
He describes the experience of starting the show to be incredibly nerve-wracking, but also incredibly exciting, and this was something that could make or break the career of everyone involved, basically, because obviously it's a high-time, prime-time slot on BBC One, the only TV channel at that time. I think BBC Two came like 4 years later or something.
No idea. I don't know the history of the BBC channels, really.
Yeah, BBC Two came out the year after, so at the time, this was the only TV channel. So Saturday evening was,
Jesus.
Big, prime time telly.
Yeah.
As a writer for the show, his first episode was the two-parter, The Edge of Destruction. This was written at the very last minute as a replacement for two other stories that wasn't ready for the studio yet. So he had to make a bottle episode set entirely within the TARDIS without a guest cast. Have you seen this episode?
No, I don't think I have.
I think you definitely have, because you've been watching on BritBox the first like 10 stories or so. You've definitely seen this episode. It's the episode where Susan goes crazy and starts trying to stab Barbara. Everyone goes fucking crazy in that episode.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah. Yep. Very, very vague, because it was like 2 years ago I saw that episode.
Yeah, because you've been stuck in the William Hartnell years for years, haven't you?
That's because it's not good.
It really isn't. I'm struggling myself. The show proved to be very successful and got a second series. David Whittaker hadn't planned on staying for more than a year in the first place and considered that the show wouldn't have lasted too much longer after a second series. And boy, was he wrong. So he decided to leave and work on other productions. He must have been very tired editing 52 scripts in a year, because that's an insane
Oh my god,
workload.
what a ridiculous workload that is. Like, you need to, you need to be doing a script every week, at least. Like,
it's fucking insane. Like, and also just for the actors, they rehearse 5 days out of the year. On the 6th day, they film it, and then on the 7th day, they either have to read the lines or film film inserts, which is 7 days work for 40 weeks out of a year is intense.
It's a heavy workload.
Dennis Spooner, who we spoke about last month, replaced him as the script editor, and David Whittaker's final script as the script editor saw the departure of Carl Ann Ford as Susan, so it made sense that Verity Lambert would ask David to introduce the next companion, Vicky, in the two-parter of Rescue. After that, he would write The Crusade, which is considered to be one of the better historical episodes. I've seen The Crusade. I struggle with most of the historical episodes aside from the Aztecs and the Time Meddler. I don't see the appeal with the historical episodes at all. I'm really struggling with them.
Yeah, historical episode. I mean, like, it's like even modern Who struggles with historical episodes. Where it's like, this is slow or this is boring. It's only ever fun when they add a little sci-fi twist to it. The straight up historicals, where especially in classic Who, where there's like very rarely a sci-fi twist in the historicals, and it's just we're in the past. It can be a slog. And
especially like I'm not a historical person. I've never been really good at history, and these episodes expect you to know the historical context of this person, I'm just like, I don't know who this is, so I'm stuck.
You're saying you're too dumb.
Yes.
to enjoy Doctor Who.
I am. The Reign of Terror was extremely hard for me to get through because I didn't understand anything, because it's set in like the Reign of Terror, obviously, and just I don't know enough about that period of history, and it was really hard to get through.
Yeah, that's the benefit of the more modern style of writing. Like, they could set it in the past, but they always make sure to have the companion be like, but what's going on in the past? I don't know history. And then the Doctor can explain exactly what's happening. But
so once leaving the show, Whittaker was still heavily involved with the Whoniverse, which is the term I'm using from now on. I didn't like it before, but now that Russell T Davies has introduced the Whoniverse, I'm going to use it.
Like it. No, I still don't like it.
Between 1964 and 1965, he collaborated with Terry Nation to write the stage play called The Curse of the Daleks. He wrote the first two Doctor Who annuals, and he wrote the first ever Doctor Who novel with Doctor Who and the Daleks, which was recently republished and illustrated like last month, I think. Quite recently. He was also involved with the two Peter Cushing Dalek movies. I think he just wrote them. I'm not quite sure what he did with the second one. I think it was like special contribution he's listed as in the credits. So
interesting.
We're getting to that second Dalek movie soon, by the way.
Oh, jeez. I need to buy it. I'm looking forward to watching that, actually.
It's excellent. I love it.
Yeah.
Around this time, Terry Nation wanted to stop writing for Doctor Who as he was trying to pitch the idea of a Dalek spin-off to America. So David Whittaker was recognised as the next best choice to write the next Dalek story, and he wrote two Dalek stories in season 4, The Power of the Daleks and Evil of the Daleks. And The Power of the Daleks was, of course, the first episode featuring Patrick Troughton, and Dennis Spooner came in to do rewrites. We talked about this last month. As Whittaker, apparently Whittaker wrote far too much material, and he wrote the characterization of the second Doctor to be as thin as possible, as an actor hadn't been cast for the role yet. Which is, I can't imagine just not knowing what... It still happens today. You don't know who you're casting, which is...
Yeah.
You just don't know the character of the Doctor yet, which is interesting. I don't know how you work around a script like that.
Yeah, no, it must be really awkward. But like that's why I always whenever I have ideas for Doctor Who stories and stuff like that, I'm always really hesitant to like write anything down because I'm like, I don't know what version of the Doctor I want to write. You know, I don't know, like, you know, if I'm doing this for like a previously cast Doctor or if I'm going to like fan cast in my head and write something down. You know, the idea, the personality of the Doctor is such an important part of the script you're writing. I can't imagine trying to write a script where you're trying to give the Doctor like no personality so that you can put anybody into that role. Like,
it was also apparently common for Whittaker to write far too much material in his scripts. We'll discuss a bit more later on, but yeah, he didn't think about budget when he was writing, basically, which is, you know, for Doctor Who, you have to think about budget.
Yeah, especially if you're like, you know, you don't have to think about budget if you're writing like a book or something because it's never going to leave the page. You could write literally anything. But when you're writing a screenplay, like, budget should be near the front of your mind.
Yeah.
Like,
that's why if you read The Writer's Tale by Russell T Davies, he's always considering the budget when he's writing his scripts. He's like, no, I can't do that idea because it would cost too much money, so I have to make it simpler and I have to make it easier for the audience. So around this time, Whittaker had become the chairman of the Writers Guild of Great Britain and spent a lot of time abroad working on other shows and movies. Whittaker spent most of his time in Australia and grew to love the country, which is why it became one of the featured locations in his next story, The Enemy of the World. And some Australian accents in this episode.
There's a lot of accents in this episode, not just Australian.
After Enemy of the World, he would write 2 more stories, The Wheel in Space and The Ambassadors of Death, which is infamous for needing Terrence Dicks, Trevor Ray, and Malcolm Hulke to come in to do some rewrites after it was decided that Whittaker wasn't writing the story in the way the production team was expecting. So Whittaker was dropped from writing the story after 3 episodes out of 7, which is...
Jesus.
That was his last story of Doctor Who, which is quite sad, honestly, for a guy who was... For a guy who was there from day one, that's quite sad.
Yeah, that is a sad way for it to end. That is a very sad way for it to end.
Yeah, so Whittaker was already living in Australia by this point and would spend the rest of his professional career there, writing for numerous Australian shows. I'm not familiar with any of them. His final written credit was A Return to the Rocks, which was a short film created for Australia Day in 1976. David Whittaker would soon return to the UK, where he would die of cancer at the age of 51 in 1980, which is...
Another Doctor Who alum dying at 50.
He was partway through the novelisation of Enemy of the World before he died and had plans to adapt Evil of the Daleks, but Enemy of the World would be wound up written by Ian Marter, who played Harry Sylvan in the first Tom Baker season. He died in the mid-80s of a heart attack, aged 41 as well, another young death.
Oh my god.
Yeah. It's a curse, I tell you.
It is a curse.
Ian Marter wrote multiple Doctor Who novels throughout his career and adapted them in a more adult tone. Apparently this novelisation of The Enemy of the World contains the word bastard, which caused a lot of complaints, which is very interesting.
Oh my! I can't believe they did such a scandalous thing.
Ian Marter didn't use any of the material prepared by Whittaker, and Ian Marter was unhappy with his final result because he had to cut out quite a lot of space. Because we only had a certain number of pages basically for these target novelizations, which is, you know, for a 6-parter, you have to cut out quite a lot, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, also, I would consider Enemy World to have very little padding apart from episode 3. Like, most of the episodes feel like they belong. You haven't seen the full thing yet, but I don't think this story has too much padding, unlike a lot of 6-parters of the era.
Yeah, we'll see how we feel about that at the end of the month. But, you know, I'm always hesitant whenever it's a part, like whenever there's more than 4 parts, I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be a slog. You know, sometimes even when it's 4 parts, I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be a slog. But you know, the first 2 parts of The Enemy of the World, you know, we'll go into it a bit more deeper. I do think that they're paced pretty decently. So
yeah, I've been rewatching all of Doctor Who from the start, and I was hoping to get it done by the time of the 60th anniversary, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do that because there's just so many roadblocks if you're stuck in a boring story. I'm about to start on the 12-part epic Daleks Master Plan. 12 parts, and most of it is missing, so it's going to be a chore to get through, I think.
Yeah, probably. It also might be confusing if most of it's missing, surely.
Yeah, I mean, it exists in audio and pictures, so
Right.
I'll get the gist of it.
Yeah, well, that's going to be, entertaining.
So yeah, this story went missing for years. Enemy of the World was transferred to 16mm recordings and was sold to Australia in June 1968, which is interesting that it's the first location it went to. In 1970, it was screened in Hong Kong, 1971, New Zealand. By the early 70s, the BBC wiped the videotapes of the story and destroyed every episode except for episode 3, which they kept in the BBC.
Classic.
Yeah, they kept in the BBC film and videotape library as an example of Doctor Who's 5th season, along with The Wheel in Space, episode 60. So they produced 40 episodes in this season, and they only kept 2 of them, which is...
Oh my god. The way that the BBC used to treat programming and Doctor Who specifically, it's the most frustrating thing in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, it's incredibly nearsighted, you know. We didn't predict that.
They're just like, fuck it. Like,
you know, I've talked about this before. Like, an American soap opera, Dark Shadows, was made in 1966, and every episode exists to this day apart from one. They made 1,225 episodes.
Oh my god.
Every episode
Jesus.
exists apart from one, which is...
Well, it's like even like classic Star Trek, you know, like that came out in like the 60s as well, and every episode exists. You know?
Yeah, they've even done like restorations of the original film print, which is... It looks amazing considering.
Yeah, like... This is the way the BBC treated it. It's so disrespectful. Right.
Yeah, so Philip Morris found 5 missing episodes as well as 4 episodes of Web of Fear in Nigeria in early 2013. I don't know why I said 19. Philip Morris basically travels the world trying to find missing television shows. Basically, think of him like Indiana Jones, except...
What an awesome job. What an awesome job that is.
Yeah, he
how does somebody even start that job? Like,
yeah, he basically goes through like war-torn countries just to find these old video sets. It's insane.
That is crazy.
He found the tape in an old TV station that hadn't been used in 4 decades. He says he got there in the nick of time because if he had arrived any later, it was likely that the tape would be completely rotted by that point.
Oh my god.
It was brought back to the BBC in May 2013 for a cleaning, and then it was officially announced to be found in October, and then immediately sold it to iTunes, which, you know, as a student, I was like, oh my god, a new Doctor Who episode has been discovered, but it immediately went to iTunes, and I had no fucking money for it, so I'd never watched it until I did this podcast.
Wow. That is one thing that I am really thankful for with streaming services, because when I was like a teenager growing up, like I was like interested in classic Who, but you know, we didn't have Sky, so we didn't have access to like the Sci-Fi Channel or anything like that, and then like we just didn't have money to buy the DVDs because there was other things I wanted to see, so I had no opportunity to watch classic Who. And now that it's up on streaming services, I've got every opportunity. Turns out I just don't like classic I'm joking. Like,
classic Who is an acquired taste, I would say.
Sometimes it's really good. Most of the times it's not. But like...
as a kid, I would watch a lot of classic Who on YouTube because it was back in the days when piracy was more available, more easy.
They're coming back. Piracy's coming back.
Especially with what Netflix is currently doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Enemy of the World saw a few key people leave, and Innes Lloyd, who had been producer for 2 years, left after his story. He didn't have a particular love for sci-fi and was growing tired of his job. Which was understandable. He would grow tired of working on a sci-fi show.
Yeah, if you don't like sci-fi.
He was the first person to see the first ever regeneration. So he was involved with William Hartnell's regeneration. We've talked about him in The 10th Planet. Mm-hmm. Sidney Newman also left around this time. He was one of the creators of Doctor Who. He was leaving the role as the head of BBC Drama after 5 years, which is an incredibly long time for those days. This was also the first episode to shoot out of order. They shot scenes for episode 3 around the same time as shooting episode 2, which was very rare in those days. And some location scenes were done while the cast was still shooting The Ice Warriors, so we used body doubles for some of the long shots of the companions and the Doctor. Which is, you know, commonplace today, but in 1967 or 8, this was...
68, yeah.
Yeah, this was very interesting. You know, after like 200 episodes, how they started doing this.
God, so much. Jesus Christ. There's so much. There's too much Classic Who.
I
really.
know. 690 odd episodes.
Jesus,
This
I
was
like
also
3 good ones.
this was also the first story to be shot in 625 line videotape, which is basically high definition at this time, because every episode before this was shot in 405 line videotape. And yeah, it looks decent. I don't see a difference.
Yeah, I don't see a difference really either. But you know, is the stuff on ITVX the like remastered stuff as well? Like the footage will have been
the version on ITVX I think is the 2013 restoration, whereas they recently re-released the DVD and made it more restored in like 2018, which is when this episode is set.
Yeah.
which we'll get into. Remember when we all dressed
will.
in these like space suits or whatever?
I wish we did actually dress like that though. Like
So yeah, obviously all year we're covering iconic episodes from each Doctor, and why did I choose this episode? Well, it's hard to pick a Troughton story because only 7 of his 21 stories still exist. One of them we've already covered, which is Tomb with Cybermen. One of them is 10 episodes long, which is too long for us to cover. And 2 of them are considered to be pretty bad, so we only really had 3 options to pick from. So, and I think I chose the best one out of the 3. So,
it's not a story I had ever heard of either. Like you know, you hear of like Tomb of the Cybermen and stuff like that, but I don't know how this story escaped my knowledge of Classic Who. I had never ever heard of this story going into it, so it's a fun surprise because I'm like, I don't know what's gonna happen.
yeah, did you see the clone Doctor come in?
Yeah, but that's just because ITVX has him in the thumbnail.
That's annoying. I was wanting that to be a surprise to you.
Yeah, no, he's the thumbnail for part 1, so I was like, oh, yeah, cool. So he's doing 2 roles.
The Enemy of the World is a unique Doctor Who story because it contains minimal sci-fi elements. It's really only like futurism, like future technology. We hardly ever use future technology in a story. And it's the only story from season 5 not to feature aliens or a base under siege. So this is very rare, especially for Troughton's Doctor. But I don't think we've ever seen like a Doctor Who episode like this since. You know, it's like an espionage kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's also a really fun concept for an idea because you know, as we learned with Capaldi's Doctor, the Doctor can just take people's faces, like even like accidentally. So you know, the Doctor running into somebody that looks like him. It's such an excellent idea for a fun story, you know?
I'm surprised Stephen Moffat didn't bring this up when he was writing for Capaldi. Like, he borrowed a face before, but also, you know, this is set in 2018 and it's also not canon anymore. So... canon's hard with Doctor Who, isn't it? Like every episode exists in a bubble. Like this episode is set around the time where, you know, Yaz, Graham, Ryan were living. Yeah. This is the same time as like when the Daleks killed the Prime Minister in London. So one of the alternative names of this episode is actually called The Enemy of the State, and this was actually a mistake on one of the scripts, but I prefer Enemy of the World. Yeah, Enemy of the World's a much more dramatic and gripping title than Enemy of the State. Like, it's bigger, isn't it? It's grander in scale. David Whittaker was commissioned to write the story on the 25th of July, 1967, and it started airing 5 months later, which is a fucking tight deadline. That's insane. That is. 6 episodes in 5 months. Jesus Christ. This story was due for delivery 4 weeks later. The first 2 episodes came 2 weeks late, which is understandable, you know. And apparently it just kept on drip feeding. So basically by the time Barry Letts was ready to cast the roles, he had no script to work on. So which is a very unusual for Classic Who. Apparently most scripts were ready by the time people were ready for cast, but around this time scripts started coming later and later because there was no control. But we'll get into that further in a few weeks. The brief for this episode was to give Patrick Troughton the chance to play dual roles because Patrick Troughton really wanted to show off his versatility. Troughton was a bit disappointed that there would be only subtle differences between the two characters.
Yeah, but I feel like there's a big enough difference, though. You know, I think he
Yeah.
does a decent job distincting the two characters, because you know, one of them, I mean, has this accent, but they are both flamboyant in different ways.
Yeah, but we'll get into the differences between the two for sure, because there's a lot of notes in that. Mary Peach, who plays Astrid in the story, the main female lead of the story, was a huge star at the time, apparently. However, they almost lost her in the role at the last minute. She was being paid for the fee that the BBC had last paid her. However, that was when she was unknown and she was just playing a tiny part in that production. So the BBC were just trying to swindle her, basically, which is...
Classic move.
Yeah, feminism. It's just how they treated females in the 1960s, especially in this story. Victoria does fucking nothing in this story apart from be scared.
Yeah, but that's some great classic Who writing there, isn't it?
Yeah, so with the producers busy, Barry Letts had to try and get her paid fairly, but in the contract the BBC put special fee. So this is a special fee for the money she was earning for this episode, so they could easily try to underpay her again in the future if he employed her again, which is quite
Gross.
disgusting, yeah.
Yeah.
This episode was made around the time The Avengers was in peak popularity. It also had physically strong female characters like Astrid. Barry Letts convinced her to take the role by saying that the character was inspired by The Avengers, especially her outfit. That's very much what they would wear in Avengers, apparently. And around this time, The Avengers had also lost its female lead, and Mary Peach was actually considered as a replacement just a few months before shooting the story. In the Radio Times, she was listed as the second lead in the star after Troughton for the role. She also took the job because her children loved the show, and she said she couldn't be considered as an actor in their eyes if she turned down the role. Apparently, Patrick Troughton flirted quite a lot with her on the set, and she basically had to turn him down by saying, "You already have 2 families, Patrick Troughton."
Oh my god.
Did you know Patrick Troughton has 2 families?
Yeah, I
Which
did.
is...
Yeah.
So yeah, she basically says, on Christmas, you'd be rushing around 3 different houses and eating 3 different Christmas meals. You'll be tired of that. And that's basically how she shooed him off, which is...
Jesus Christ.
Patrick Troughton is an interesting character.
Yeah, he certainly was interesting man in his personal life, wasn't he?
Yeah. So the music in this episode was mostly Hungarian to fit the settings for episode 2 and 3. I'm going to mispronounce his name, but Bela Bartok's work was mostly chosen for this, and I think the music fits quite well for this story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't really notice the music watching it the first time, but I'll keep an ear out for it as we go through it again. But I sometimes classic Who, the music is the one thing that you do notice. So not noticing the music is probably a good thing.
Oh yeah, God, yeah. Go back to our Sea Devils podcast to listen to our experiences.
Pew, 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 pew.
Absolute nightmare. But yeah, that's it for the writing segment of this episode. You want to dive in?
Awesome. Yeah, let's dive into The Enemy of the World, Part 1.
Where shall I start? At the beginning, please. We've been subjected to a number of attacks because I look like this salamander of yours.
I'm not surprised. I'll show you why. I have a video wire of Salamander addressing the United Zones Conference on
And
World
meanwhile, over at the United Zones General Assembly, from all over the world, delegates were flocking in, eager to hear the latest report from Leader Salamander.
The progress, Mr. President, of the Sun Conservation Establishment at Canona in the Australasian Zone is, I am delighted to report, highly satisfactory. But we cannot yet guarantee good summer holidays for all. However, we have now in orbit the Mark 7 sun catcher, and already we have been able to concentrate the sun's rays into much needed areas. The great Canadian wheat trains are safe. And now, Mr. President, Ukraine, the grain field of the planet, that unfortunate area between Poltava and Kirovograd, devastated by the elements 2 short years ago. What have I to say to you about that? I can tell you that on both banks of the Dnieper River, the corn is ripening in the sun. And 10,000 robot harvesters are moving down to gather in 50 million tons of flour.
There's nothing there to show he's a bad man.
Quite agree, Victoria. He seems to be a public benefactor, quite a speaker too, and remarkably handsome. Didn't you think so, Jamie?
He's one of the most popular men on the planet. Many people call him the shopkeeper of the world. The savior, in fact, some of them.
Well, what's he saved the world from?
Starvation. Too many people, too little food.
Until Salamander invented his sun store, but surely you've heard, you must know.
Oh, yes, well, of course, we've heard something.
The sun store collects the rays from the sun and stores them in concentrated form.
Oh, like the ionizer, Doctor. Yes, a rather different principle, I think, Jamie.
Oh,
but...
never mind how it works. What's it for?
A salamander can force grow 3, sometimes 4 crops in one summer.
Well, why do these men want to kill him? I mean, one minute you say he's saving the world.
For his own ends. Step by step, he's taking control of this planet.
So our episode begins, as every episode of Classic Who does, with the theme song, and it's a pretty fun little theme song. I think the second Doctor's intro is way too short, though. Like, it's over so quickly.
They're all too short.
They are all too short, but it's fun enough. And we then open up to the TARDIS appearing at the seaside, and the Doctor and everybody stepping out. What I really like about this is when he opens up the door, you just see through to the back of the TARDIS.
Yeah. You know, classic Who never took into too much consideration that you could see the inside of the TARDIS just being black.
Yeah. Yeah, they because it's happened multiple times.
Yeah.
Like, it happens in the 3 Doctors as well, where you just see into the TARDIS.
So yeah, this opening is what Barry Letts and Derek Sharon changed the most about the original script, because if he wanted an all-action start, in the original draft, the TARDIS crew would have landed on a beach with thousands of people and funfairs, and the Doctor would have been pursued through crowds. However, this would have been near impossible to shoot, so instead Barry Letts decided to make it a deserted beach, and as a compromise he decided to use a hovercraft and a helicopter to create a sense of excitement. And yeah, you know, hundreds of extras on a cold November day trying to get so much coverage of that, and I can't imagine that being possible.
See, I'm starting to understand what they were saying when they said this guy doesn't write with budget in mind.
Also, you have to pay all those hundreds of extras, and I can't see how that would have worked.
No, it would have been a nightmare. But the Doctor is very excited to be at the beach. He gets asked, like, where are they? He's like, it doesn't matter, we're at the beach. Then he goes running down the hill as fast as you've seen anybody run down a hill. Which I really liked, as well, as this is, like, this being our, like, episode covering the second Doctor. I think this is such an excellent way to introduce him. As a character of the second Doctor, because last week we were looking at the first Doctor, who's very slow and bumbling and doesn't really do much of anything, and then immediately we're introduced to the second Doctor. He goes running as fast as he can down that hill. Yeah. You know, it's such a great way to showcase the personality of Patrick Troughton's Doctor, like, immediately.
And the Doctor rips off his outfit and reveals that underneath he's wearing a Victorian bathing costume, which was a suggestion by Patrick Troughton, but he later regretted it because it was a cold winter day. So, but he is so much fun in his opening scene. Like, just immediately, there's so much charm and charisma from him. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's great. It must have sucked to go running into the ocean on a cold winter's day.
Yeah,
like, oh my god, that must have been awful. But he plays it well. You would never tell that he's probably hating every moment of it.
There's a point where he dives head first into the waves, and he's underneath the water completely.
Yeah, oh my god, he commits to it. But as this is going on, they're getting spied on from afar by some people in a hovercraft, and they're like, oh my god, it's him. Who are they referring to? We think obviously at this point that they just know who the Doctor is, but they call up, like, some base with a big map of the Australia-Asian zone. I think it's the Australasian. That's the word, because that's the continent. The Australasian zone. Why not just say Australia? Like, what do you need to be?
I mean, I guess they've just merged. You know, in just 2018, so much events happened. You know.
Yeah, but they call up base and they're like, "Hey, we found him. He's here for like we don't know why he's here, but he's here. We're gonna deal with it." And the lady at the base is like, "No, don't deal with it. We need to tell this other dude about it." And like, they have this little back and forth, but they basically disagree that they're gonna deal with it right now. They're gonna kill him. They pull out a really, really modern looking gun, definitely a gun from 2018, not a gun from 1942.
So with the whole hovercraft, which is interesting, we don't see much hovercraft in Doctor Who these days because obviously it's not really a vehicle that exists really.
Yeah. People they exist in like swamps of like Florida. Like people don't really use them, do they?
Yeah. So Barry Letts was reading the newspaper about an ex-Navy officer who was developing this 4-man hovercraft, and he basically just called them up and just got to use it, which is interesting. The original script said it would have been out at sea and then come into the land. However, it was really hard to control. It got caught in the wind a few times and couldn't move further in a few weeks. Like half an hour of this shoot was spent on trying to repair it, and apparently the guy who created it got a massive bruise on his thigh because it just hit him. Which,
ouch!
Absolute
Jesus.
Nightmare. But you would never tell. It looks great on screen. It really works.
Does. Yeah, it does really work on screen. But the Doctor and that, they notice that the hovercraft is coming and they quickly run for the hills. The Doctor's also got a great line where he's like, maybe they're just doing what humans do in their free time, which is try to destroy each other. Fantastic little line as they're getting hunted down now by these strangers. And this is where the soundtrack's really kicking off. And I was properly listening to it this time, and it's really fun. It's very orchestral and bombastic, but it does veer into being almost like you could stick it into an episode of Looney Tunes and it would fit.
Yeah, if you go back to An Unearthly Child, I feel the same thing about the soundtrack in that episode. It feels a lot of classical music sounds very Looney Tunesy because obviously Looney Tunes used a lot of classical music.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why we make the connection.
Yeah, definitely. But as these guys are running up the hill, then a helicopter shows up to rescue the Doctor and the companions. The whole time, the companions are being really annoying. Yeah. I don't remember their names right now. What are their names
Jamie
again?
and Victoria. In the novelization, Victoria is absent from the entire story, apparently, which makes sense. Because,
amazing. It does. She does nothing.
Sorry, in David Whittaker's proposal, she's absent. So yeah, in this whole story, she does nothing, apart from in episode 3, she tries to cook. That's all she does, basically. And also, the setting of the book is 2030 instead of 2018, which is still 50 years ahead of the present day to them, which is interesting that they would still go ahead 50 years. I wonder which one's canon. Is 2030 canon?
Yeah. 2030 can be canon for now until we get to 2030. There's no Doctor Who. I mean, there's probably Doctor Who episodes set in 2030 that I'm just not remembering, but there's not been any modern series that have come out in the year 2030, is there? So,
what do you think about the costumes everyone is wearing in this episode?
I love them.
Yeah,
I love them as far as I kind of wish fashion was like this. The retro futurism in 2018 is fantastic.
Yeah,
everyone's wearing these weird high collared but tight It's the classic sci-fi outfit that you've seen in any old sci-fi. Is what people are wearing. But what I really like is the scene that we're about to go to once they get out the helicopter and they're inside this house. It is the most 60s wallpaper you've ever seen in a house. It's the most hideous pattern all over the place.
Oh god, yeah. The retrofuturism is my favorite aesthetic. It's futuristic technology mixed with 60s, it really works,
It's so much fun.
It's like the Brad Bird movie Tomorrowland that deals very heavily with retrofuturism. I like it. It's really fun. Apparently,
I've not seen Tomorrowland.
Tomorrowland was pretty decent. It just got a lot of hate. I enjoyed Tomorrowland. Yeah. It's pretty fun. It has a weird subplot where this kid was, George Clooney's character was a kid once, obviously, but when he was a kid, he was in love with a robot, and 40 years has passed, and the robot obviously still stays the same age. She's a little kid, and there's a lot of weirdness between them too.
That's gross. Yeah, yuck.
Apparently, this was the first time a helicopter was ever used in Doctor Who. Barry Letts really wanted to create some unique action shots when it came to the helicopter scene. He said, this is him speaking, to get what I wanted, my film cameraman Fred Hamilton roped himself in with me inside the helicopter with a pilot to counterbalance Fred's weight. This had been miscalculated though, and we were all very nearly killed as the helicopter just missed crashing into the ground. Which,
Jesus Christ.
And apparently the helicopter pilot was a bit of a weird character. So I was reading Doctor Who magazine that was produced in the 80s, and it said that the cast apparently expressed concerns about the pilot hired to fly the helicopter because he had eaten a glass at a meal the night before. He had eaten a glass.
A glass?
A glass. So I googled this. Apparently the information had been mixed up with another story, Fear the Deep. So this is from IMDb, so it's not a reliable source, but it's an even wilder story. It was apparently planned to film scenes with an actual flying helicopter. However, the idea had to be scrapped after it was discovered that in the night before filming, the pilot got heavily drunk, damaged a bar chandelier he swung from, and even ate glass. Because of that, Patrick Troughton refused to take off with the pilot. Absolute coward, Patrick Troughton. And
the guy sounds insane.
This is seemingly confirmed in the DVD commentary because Fraser Hines said the pilot had the nickname of Mad Mike, and he would drink brandy and then chew on the brandy glass. This guy sounds insane.
Yeah, that's crazy. I wouldn't get in a helicopter with him either.
But yeah, that shot of the helicopter flying away and the two men still shooting at them is really fucking great.
It's a cool shot. It's a really cool shot. Yeah. It feels really big budget for classic Who as well. Like I'd never seen them like pull off a shot like that. And like, usually they just cut to like stock footage or something.
Yeah, and for an opening of a story, that's really cinematic, and it just hooks you right in, doesn't it? It's really exciting way to open up a story.
Yeah, it is very, very fun.
And also, I never consider that, the cameraman is putting himself in danger in these kind of situations as well as, the actors and stuff. So I'm glad nothing bad happened on that set. Jesus Christ.
But then they the Doctor explains to the companions what a helicopter is, and then they land. And did I miss something? When did the pilot get shot? Why is she in? Did she get shot like when they were? Because it's like they land and then she's like, "Oh, I'm hurt." And they have to like rush to get her in, but like they never like say anything when she's flying. Or I just missed something.
I think they shot her as she was flying up because they kept on shooting at her.
But like they never gave a reaction where the pilot was like, "Ow, I've been hit."
Maybe we missed it.
Maybe.
Or maybe she's just pretending not to be shot because she has to fucking carry out this mission.
She's got to fly. Yeah. But they bring her inside to this big house that's definitely from 2018, not the 1960s. And, she's like, go get this medical kit in here and you can help patch me up and something like that. And they have this conversation where the Doctor's trying to figure out, like, why did you save me? And she's like, who are you? Like, and there's this, like, back and forth. She's trying to figure out who the Doctor is because she obviously recognizes him as Salamander, but speaking to him, she can tell that this is not Salamander. This is somebody completely different, and they have a very fun little back and forth where she's trying to guess like what type of Doctor the Doctor is. I really enjoy their little conversation here.
Yeah, there's a moment where Astrid is like, "You're the most amazing man who has ever fallen out of the sky," and the Doctor's like, it's amazing. And then she's like, I think she says she basically has to use him.
You need to do, she's like, "I need you to do something for me, but you'll probably die."
His smile just immediately fades. It's like, and also you can see Patrick Troughton's probably flirting with her off screen because there is a bit of flirting going on camera, I think.
Yeah. But she says, she's like, you look a lot like a man that's determined to become dictator of the world, called Salamander. And then, what's the female companion's name? She does nothing.
Victoria. Yeah.
Victoria. Yeah. Victoria says a dictator like Napoleon. I was like, well, why would you choose Napoleon? What a random choice to say dictator. Like he was emperor. He wasn't which I guess is technically a type of dictator. But why wouldn't you choose like a more recent figure from history. Why would you go to Napoleon immediately?
She's from the 18th century, so she probably can figure out. Victoria's from the 18th century, and Jamie's from the 19th century. So there's a lot of fun moments where they're just trying to discover what a helicopter is. It's a big whirly bird. Yeah, but the irony of Victoria not really being much of a companion is interesting, because last month we were talking about the female companion surprisingly being decent, Yeah. And her name was Vicky, the same name.
Yeah. Vicky was surprisingly really, really good in the story we covered last month, the Time Meddler. But yeah, Victoria, different person, not good in this one, but that's not her fault. That's more down to the writing.
She wasn't good. She wasn't that good in the Tomb of the Cyberman either. We covered that a few years ago.
God, I don't even remember. But I really like the idea, and I like it's something that Classic Who did all the time that Modern Who just doesn't really do, which is have the companions from different periods in history. Like some are from the future, some are from the past, some are from modern day. Whereas like with Modern Who, it's like, they're all basically from modern day, because they have to be like our audience window. They need to like represent us, but like have two. Have one from modern day, and then like have somebody from the future or somebody from the past, because it adds such a interesting like dynamic to the TARDIS. It's and then like if you do historical episodes, suddenly that companion's like in his element, or it's such a fun idea that I think that they should definitely touch on more.
I don't even think you need them from the modern day, because you can feel relation. You can relate to a character from the future in the same way you can relate to a character in the modern day.
Plus, they'll have like all the same questions that a regular, like, where are we? What's going on? Oh, Doctor, please give me exposition.
And also, I don't think the companion always needs to be given exposition. You could just have a normal human being who's aware of what's going on. That could be still interesting. Like I think the idea of the audience surrogate character being the companion is kind of outdated, because the audience is savvy in what science fiction is. So if a Dalek appears, you could just it's a little squid in a robot machine. Everyone knows that basically at this point.
Yeah, but you got to think, in the world of Doctor Who, nobody knows what a Dalek is.
True. A Dalek killed the Prime Minister and nobody blinked an eye.
Nobody knows. Nobody gave a shit. But the people that were chasing them then arrive outside the building and start firing in the guns, and everybody gets told, we have to run, quick, we have to go away. So they get chased out of the house, and one of the guys, he's like an evil dude with a goatee, he gets shot in the back by one of his own men for some reason. I think it was like an accident or something, because they seem pretty torn up about it. But they all chase them out of the house. They run into the helicopter to be like, we'll get a better sight of them from the helicopter. They'll never escape us. And then they explode. And I wasn't. Why did they explode?
So there's a line earlier in the script where Astrid is flying the helicopter and she says there's a leaky engine or something. Basically, Barry Letts didn't want the two men to get away with murder, so he rewrote the script so they would die in an explosion. Basically, he just wrote that flimsy line in as an excuse.
As an excuse for the helicopter to spontaneously combust.
The helicopter explosion is stock footage of a model test from Russia with Love that wasn't used in the film. And the same clip would be used again in an episode we already covered, The Demons. If you remember when we're trying to get into the dome with a helicopter.
Yes. And it explodes.
Yeah. Same shot, but in colour, obviously.
Mental. That's crazy. But the Doctor ends up getting taken to this like other base place to chat with a dude who is like the leading opposition to Salamander. He's like leading the like small resistance up against him. There's like espionage to try and take him down, and we get an amazing. The scene is what like the entire rest of the episode is inside this one room. But we get introduced to Salamander as he's giving a big speech to basically the United Nations, but it's called the United Zones because I guess in 2018 like there is no countries. Everything is like we're like one planet, and instead we're split into zones. Which how is that any different than countries? Who fucking knows? But
so yeah, the effect of the TV was actually achieved by using back projection, and it looks pretty decent. Like usually,
yeah, it does.
Obviously TV is fake wasn't invented around that time, and it looks better in the film than actual TV. So Troughton was using a Yucatan accent. And I don't know how accurate this accent is because I'm not familiar with Mexican accents, but
yes,
it sounds okay, I think.
It sounds okay. It doesn't seem super offensive. Maybe it is.
That's one thing we have to get into, I think.
Yeah. What I was more interested in, I mean, I'm thankful that they didn't do it, but he must be the whitest Mexican to ever be born.
So makeup artist Sylvia James changed his hairstyle, fluffed his eyebrows, and gave him a fake tan to convey he was slightly different from the Doctor, but I think the fake tan is good enough so you can just imagine, oh yeah, it's just from his sun because Mexico is a hot place, so it's not, he's not wearing brown face, which
I'm sure Patrick Troughton probably would have been all for.
Yeah, because if you go back to our 10th Planet podcast, I spoke about how he wanted to wear brown face with a turban for his Doctor, and I'm so glad everybody was like, no, don't do that, because
it would really change the tone of the show.
I don't think this portrayal was racist, but again, I'm not the person to speak about that.
No, not at all. But it definitely probably totes the line a bit too close. But on the other hand, sure, you could do an accent and not be racist with it. Like, it's a fine line to run. But I don't know why they would. Why make him Mexican? Why not make him like Eastern European? Why not choose like a nation that is within his own like race of people? Why go around? But like at the other hand, like why should it matter?
Yeah,
it's a murky gray area.
Yeah. But on set apparently his co-stars were teasing him because apparently he sounded a bit too much like another country. I can't remember exact country, maybe Germany, but everybody was making fun of him and he was a bit embarrassed about his accent. But again, I think it sounds well enough. And Salamander's name, of course, comes from a lizard that can live in extreme heat, which actually fits in with his achievements with Suncatcher, which is a very Mr. Burns movie. He's basically capturing the sun.
Yeah, he's like the guy's got this amazing line where what is the exact line that is? Because hang on, the Sun Store. So there's this. So Salamander is like the savior of the world. Basically, he's revolutionized this way to grow crops to make. He's like ended world hunger essentially. Which is it's an amazing concept for a villain because it makes Salamander such a three-dimensional complicated character because he's he's done something genuinely good to save the world, but he's done it allegedly for his own selfish benefits, so that he can take control and like become world leader and dictator of all. But he's been doing these genuinely great things, which is why the Doctor is like, when he finds out that this stuff, he's like, he seems like a nice dude. What are you doing? How can I even trust what you're saying? How do I know that you're not the evil one trying to take down this good man? But the guy explains what he's done. He's like, he did it with his sun store, which takes rays from the sun and stores them. I'm like, that is just a hilarious bit of exposition. Like, it does not explain what it does at all. Like, you just said the same thing twice.
Yeah, how do you store a sun?
With the sun store.
I like how Salamander is written. It's really strong. It's a really strong villain for Patrick Troughton to play. Like this episode has some really good writing, some really good acting. This whole scene is just fun to watch because it's just a lot of good actors just playing off against each other. Patrick Troughton is so good in this scene when he gets so angry about the fact that this dude just called Donald Bruce. Donald Bruce is coming.
And Donald Bruce is like the head of security or something like that. For like protecting Salamander, and this guy being like a political opposition, they're like butting heads with each other, and the dude is like manipulating the Doctor into pretending to be Salamander. Otherwise, they're all gonna die when fucking this Bruce dude gets here. And they have a really, really good argument about it where like the Doctor gets pressured into having to pretend to be Salamander before this Bruce dude comes in, and it's so well acted. And something that is really shocking for this episode that I feel like I just need to touch on briefly. This is the crispest, clearest audio I've ever heard in Classic Who.
Yeah, the audio.
There's like no noise at all. It's insane.
Yeah, the audio has been cleaned up considerably well, you know, like, I think the Time Leather was also very good, which we just covered recently, but...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this one it's like notice, like when there's like on the close-ups of Patrick Troughton and he's talking, like it's like such a, like, you hear his voice and the like bass and tenor as he's like speaking quietly so clearly.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my god, this is amazing.
Yeah, there's a moment where he's basically just looking into the camera, just trying to impersonate Salamander, and there's a whole brilliant scene of just him. He was like, he's like, oh no, I can't do this. But then again, I was always interested in phonetics, and he just figured, he's just like, oh yeah, he must have come from Mexico, so he would speak like this. And it's just like, yeah, this is just watching Patrick Troughton's acting method right here on screen.
Yeah, it's very, very, very
and of
cool.
course the Doctor would be interested in phonetics, and Patrick Troughton made sure that his accent is slightly off to the real Salamander, which I wish was played off in the script. You know, like there was a scene where he's
like, you sound a bit weird.
Yeah,
right?
and that could have been some added tension, but we never really addressed that in the script.
It is a very nice detail, and you know, showcasing, which is what Troughton wanted, showcasing his acting, because to do a similar yet slightly wrong accent to an accent that you're already doing, like that is an excellent, like, he's imitating his own performance but doing like a slightly worse imitation of himself. Yeah,
it reminds me of a Looney Tunes short where Daffy Duck is impersonating Bugs Bunny and Bugs Bunny is impersonating Daffy Duck. Obviously the two characters are voiced by Mel Blanc, and Mel Blanc somehow manages to figure out a middle ground for these two characters impersonating each other, which is, if you want to watch, I think it's called Rabbit Season. It's a really fascinating short to watch because Mel Blanc is such a good actor in that little short.
Yeah.
And Patrick Troughton is really good as well. Like,
yeah, for sure. But then we get to meet this Bruce dude, who looks like Colin Baker does now. Like it's like Colin Baker traveled back into the past to shoot this. It's insane.
So Donald Bruce is played by Colin Douglas, who really hated his time on Doctor Who, and he said he would never return to Doctor Who. He returned 10 years later.
That's a classic story there, isn't it? But this episode ends with him being like, you know, why have you called me here? You know, you're planning on doing something. There's been like dangerous things going on, people being killed, and then the Doctor comes out pretending to be Salamander, and this is our cliffhanger because what's his name? Something Bruce?
Colin Bruce.
Colin Bruce. What a stupid name.
No, sorry, Donald Bruce. I'm mixing up his real name.
Donald Bruce is like in shock that Salamander is here. Of course, it's not really Salamander; it's the Doctor, and it's a really strong cliffhanger to end on. This entire episode is fantastic. You know, it's like 3 locations as well.
Yeah,
like,
you could also read that cliffhanger as, does Donald Bruce believe it? Yeah. And you know, that's a whole week just waiting to see whether or not the Doctor's going to be caught in this moment.
Mm-hmm. It's a really fast-paced episode. Does not feel like it's padding at all. It's like go straight from the start, and you get given the story really fast, and then suddenly it just kind of ends. Yeah. But that's because, you know, Classic Who's 20 minutes long, so they're getting through so much so quickly. But I really enjoyed.
Yeah, really well-paced first episode with some great location scenes. That opening is just fucking amazing, and Patrick Troughton is on he's on his A game in this episode. Really great episode. I do wish there was a bit more companion involvement, which is a complaint I'll have the entire story, but you know.
Yeah. But let's jump straight in to part 2 as we continue going through this story. Part 2 is not as good.
Oh, lies, Salamander, lies, I assure you.
So you say.
What are you going to do? My family, my friends.
My dear man. My dear Federer, you don't suppose that I intend to make your swindling public, huh? This is just an insurance, hmm? Sit down. Forget it. I tell you what I'm going to do for you.
What?
You are going to replace Danish as controller of this zone. But don't say anything. I know you'll accept.
What do you want?
I tell you, there will be disaster in this zone. I cannot stop the disaster, but I can come to the aid of this zone when it's happened.
And take over. I see. The zone would be yours.
Oh, ours, Veteran, ours. It's a partnership I'm offering you. Either you have half of everything, or you have nothing.
There's Alexander Danish.
Oh, yes, the popular, well-beloved Danish. What a pity.
Pity?
Oh, didn't I tell you? Danish is going to die. Mysteriously. An assassin. Terrible.
I can't do that. You can't ask me.
I think I can ask you to do anything I want.
Episode 2 begins immediately where episode 1 ended, as is what Classic Who likes to do.
I had to think about that one.
I was like, I guess I'm rhyming this. But it starts off with this Brucey man not really sure how Salamander could be in front of him, and he starts like confronting and questioning him, and Salamander's basically like, or I say Salamander, the Doctor is basically like, shut up, I'm in charge, I'm just going to do things like because I want to do them, you're not, you know what I want you to know, which is some excellent little mind games from him. Like it's a very fun little back and forth conversation.
The Doctor is really good as Salamander, but Patrick Troughton is playing 3 different characters in this episode. Essentially, he's playing the Doctor, he's playing Salamander, and he's playing the Doctor as Salamander. It's a fun little performance, I think.
It is. It's very, very fun. It makes me think of Face Off, simply because I watched Face Off very recently, because I did a Nick Cage marathon with my brother, where we watched like a bunch of Nick Cage movies, and then we watched.
Did you tell me you watched 8 movies?
Yeah, it was something like that. It was a lot. But it took all day. But we watched Face Off, and Face Off is amazing. It's terrible, but it's fantastic. But in that movie, you've got Nick Cage playing Nick Cage, and then Nick Cage playing John Travolta playing like. It gets like it's Nick Cage doing John Travolta, and then at a certain point, like it's Nick Cage doing John Travolta doing Nick Cage, or John Travolta doing Nick Cage doing John Travolta, because they're like trying to pretend to be like, it's fantastic. It's so insane, such an insane movie.
The same thing happens in a movie I recently watched called Monkey Bone, where Brendan Fraser is playing a monkey for part of the movie because he body swaps with him, and he's basically swinging around in the bedroom. You should watch Monkey Bone. It's fucking weird.
I've heard of it before, but I probably will never get around to watching it. It reminds me of the line in Tropic Thunder that Robert Downey Jr. has when he's like, "I'm just a dude pretending to be a dude playing another dude," like, which is a great movie.
It is. I haven't seen it in so long.
I've recently watched the extended director's cut, and it's fantastic, worth watching. But they basically managed to convince Bruce that this is Salamander and that Bruce needs to like kind of fuck off. And as Bruce is leaving, out of nowhere, he just insults Jamie, and he's like, "I hate you, Jamie." Jamie's like, "I didn't say a word. Why is he attacking me?" And the Doctor's like, "I don't know. Must be something to do with your face." Like. I really like. They have the actor that plays Jamie, whose name I don't know.
Fraser Hines.
Yeah, Fraser Hines and Patrick Troughton have got such amazing chemistry together. They are just a fantastic duo.
Yeah,
they're wonderful to watch.
The famous story is that Jamie was supposed to be only in one story, and then he wound up lasting the entirety of Patrick Troughton's run, which is, he's obviously very good in his role.
Yeah, he is. He is superb. He's probably one of my favorite Classic Who companions that we've ever covered. Because he actually has a character and he has a relationship with the Doctor that's interesting, rather than just being there to scream.
Yeah, and also Fraser Hines and Patrick Troughton are really good friends, and we just did a lot of improv together, like in Tomb of the Cybermen, where we're just holding hands for a bit.
Yeah. But the scene continues with the Doctor still like unsure if he wants to be Salamander. He's got this great line where he's like, "It's very clear that you and Salamander are on different sides, but how do I know which side is the good side? Like, how do I know that you are good and Salamander is bad? How do I know I'm not being manipulated into doing something I shouldn't be doing? Like, why don't I just stay out of it? Because, this is not where I'm from. This is not my time zone. I shouldn't be time meddling like some sort of monk.
But he's also doing it for another reason that comes into play later. I'm not going to spoil it because you've only seen 2 episodes, but yeah, it's good that it's heavily established in these first 2 episodes. The Doctor is still suspicious about the whole thing. Yeah. He's not really sure what's going on. He needs evidence about what Salamander is doing.
It's I really like the conflict in this episode. It's so well written. But we then cut to Bruce and a man with a very bad haircut as they're having a long discussion about trying to get in contact with Salamander. And this, I think, is one of the weakest scenes in the episode. I think it kind of goes on for a bit too long, where the guy's like, I can't get hold of Salamander because he's in a meeting. He told me not to get hold of him. Bruce is like, well, you better get hold of him. The guy's like, well, I can't. And this just kind of goes on until he's like, I'll get hold of him when he's free. And that's basically how the scene ends. It is longer than it should be.
I will say the younger guy is perfectly cast because he's just smug and unlikable the entire scene. You just hate him.
Yeah, he is like this weird, like, you know, in this like hypothetical version of 2018 where there's like one government and all the nations have united and it's just this horrible political bureaucracy mess. There's like 100% going to be loads of dudes like that, these slimy guys that are just there for their own benefit, you know. Like it's great characterization. I really like this hypothetical world that they have built.
And also just on the board, it's a lot of good performances, I would say. Just aside from maybe one of the companions, but she's not really given much, so I can't really complain about her.
Nothing. She just kind of stands in the background, so like nothing to do. It'd be such boring days at work. How many lines do I have to remember? 1. Amazing. But we then cut to meeting the actual Salamander, as he's like discussing with some dude. Hang on. Oh, Jesus. We then cut to the actual Salamander as he's discussing with some dude, like that there's going to be a volcano exploding really soon and he needs to evacuate his people or they're all going to die.
Yep.
And this guy's like, there's no way that a volcano is going to explode. This volcano has been dormant for centuries. Like, it's extinct. It's dead. This is a dead volcano. What are you talking about? And Salamander's like, I'm never wrong. This volcano is going to explode because I have predicted that it's going to explode. And the guy's like, okay, maybe I believe you, but I'm going to have my men check it out. I'm going to have my scientists look at it. And Salamander's like, nah, you're not going to learn anything from them because they will not find what I found. You know, I'm smarter than everybody else. Which it's an interesting dynamic for Salamander as well. It's also interesting, we'll get into it a little bit later when the volcano does explode, because it adds even more depth to the story, where you're like, was this sabotage? Was this setup? I really like the character of Salamander so far.
He is so powerful, and he's not shouting at people's faces or holding guns or shit like that. He is just powerful in his presence alone. And Patrick Troughton is just... He is so unlike the Doctor in his performance. It's really solid performance.
It is very good. We also get briefly introduced to a very interesting character, that I wasn't really expecting for Classic Who to have, because, you know, if you look at Classic Who, it has this problem of it's full of white guys.
Yep.
And that's about it. But in this episode and for the rest of the story as well, there is a black lady in it who is not treated like a black lady would be treated usually in these types of stories. She is given a full character to play. You know, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and also the last time we covered a Patrick Troughton episode, we had a black dude who was basically just a slave to all these white people, and he was silent, and his whole character was he was strong and silent. That was his whole character.
Yeah.
But you know, when we covered the 10th Planet, there was a black astronaut, the first black astronaut in television.
There was.
So,
and it was...
Classic Doctor Who is very interesting in terms of its race representation.
Yeah, because they didn't do it a lot, but when they did do it, it was like, oh, you're actually doing this pretty well. Yeah, you should be doing this more.
Aside from Tomb of the Cybermen.
As long as you just ignore the times when they weren't doing it. But but we then cut to Jamie and Victoria as they're like, oh my god, that rocket trip, because they traveled to like wherever they traveled via rocket, as we all did in 2018. Remember when we all got really into traveling in rockets? But they're standing definitely in a park and not next to a big
Oh god.
flat screen.
Yeah,
As
that back projection is awful. It's just like completely washed out. It's grainy.
yeah, really flat. Like
It also has that film quality where it just kind of jiggles around on screen a little bit, so it just looks fake. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they needed to have that camera angle. They could have just placed a bush. It could have actually. We did place a bush right behind the two characters. They could have just kept that angle the entire time. You would never known.
Yeah, I mean, like, kudos on them for trying to make it seem like they're, like, somewhere they're not, but it did not really work, did it? Also, if you look at the bush, it casts a shadow onto the projection.
Oh, God. and there's a moment later where Jamie becomes... He basically just enters the film. I mean, he steps out of the film. It's really distracting.
Yeah, it's best not to think about it. But the Jamie gets given like this pass for him and Victoria to get into Salamander's palace, and then that's the last we see of them for now. As we cut to the lady whose name I don't remember. What's her name?
Astrid.
Astrid.
You remember
yes.
Kylie Minogue in Voyage of the Dawn? Same name.
Yes.
And
same character.
An anagram of TARDIS as well.
Yeah. But she's talking on the radio to nobody. She's having this. She's like having like one side of a conversation, but we don't hear the other side of the conversation, which is a really strange way to set up the scene because it's clearly like a walkie-talkie she's talking on, and I don't get it. But she's talking to nobody. Eventually gets patched through to the Doctor and the guy who's trying to convince the Doctor to be Salamander.
Kent.
There's too many names, but Kent Brockman. And she's basically catching up on everything that's going through as the Doctor's listening. And there's this really fun little line where she's like, Jamie and Victoria are a bit weird, aren't they? And Kent is like, yeah, but the Doctor's with me, by the way, so let's talk about something else right now.
And there's a moment where the Doctor's like, his face just drops with disappointment. He's like, I'm not weird. So there's a moment where Astrid is like, oh yeah, we're just going to meet, I'm going to meet somebody underneath a jetty, is it called? And the Doctor mishears it as Yetu. Oh.
Yeah, they're going to use a disused Yeti to...
This was 2 stories before this one. The Doctor was meeting the Yetis, and I think the next episode he also meets the Yetis, so this is fresh in his mind. So this is a weird scene because for this whole episode, Troughton was able to stay in Salamander makeup the entire episode since the Doctor stayed in disguise, making it easier for him to play with 2 characters in a 75-minute recording block. You have to remember that, 75 minutes. So the entire time we have to use stock inserts and all that shite, and it's just difficult to get the 2 men together, Salamander and the Doctor in one recording block. So we had to use recording breaks and shit like that. But in this scene, the Doctor's in his normal clothes, and this is because I think this is, and in the camera script, this scene is present as well. So this must have been shot in episode 1. So that's more out of order recording, which is interesting for Doctor Who at this time.
That is, it's a rare occurrence for Doctor Who at this time, isn't it? So the episode continues as we cut to the man called Federin, as he's very nervous and having a drink because Salamander wants to have a talk with him. And he's having a discussion with this lady whose name I don't remember. What's her name again? Faraya?
Something like that, yeah.
Yes. And it's a very fun little interaction as he's like drinking the water and stuff like that, and she's like, "Oh, how are you feeling, by the way? Because I'm the food taster and I've not tried this water yet." Which causes him to freak out even more because he's like, "Oh my god, it could be poisoned." But she's like, "Nah, you'd be dead by now if you were poisoned." This is very funny.
It's a really fun interaction, and also it lays the groundwork of, oh yeah, this woman she also doesn't like Salamander, so that's going to be a plot point that plays in later on.
Yeah. And then, Salamander comes in and starts to intimidate Federer by calling a guard. But as he calls the guard, Jamie appears out of nowhere and takes the gun off him, which causes the guard to collapse. like, I assume like he must have hit him in the back or something. But it's really like you don't really see it. He
Remember,
just dies.
They fucking have to do these things trying to the most non-violent way possible. So it's usually just a hit in the head or the back of the neck or something.
Yeah. But then Jamie tells everybody not to move as he points a gun at them and grabs this device, which we're later told is a radio for some reason, and throws it off the cliffside. And we cut to Astrid then pressing a button and blowing it up, making it look like the thing was like a bomb all along, which Jamie's using. I thought this was like a really clever manipulation tactic to get Jamie on the inside of Salamander, where he saves, quote unquote, saves his life so that he gets promoted into like being part of his security team or something like that. And he also manages to get Victoria in by saying that she's his girlfriend and she's super cute and should have a job in the kitchen or something.
Yeah, there's also some really believable lines like, oh yeah, I tried to get in but your guards wouldn't let me, and if I had shouted for your attention you would have had me shot on sight.
You wouldn't have believed me. Yeah.
And
did it.
Also, one of the guards is played by Fraser Hines' brother. That's why one of them looks suspiciously like Jamie.
Oh, interesting.
But I'm not sure if it's the same brother who played Jamie later on in the series, because there's an episode in The Mind Robber where the whole point of the story is it's set in the world of fiction or whatever it's called, and basically anything can happen. Like Rapunzel is a character in that episode. Right. One of the episodes, Jamie gets replaced for a few episodes by his brother.
Yeah, weird. But something to mention as well is when, what's his name? Oh my god. Dude in the gimp outfit.
I can't remember his name, but yeah. He is just wearing full leather.
He is, yeah. But when he's chatting with the lady, she uses the word brujo or something like that, which when he asks Salamander about it, he says, oh, it's a word we use in Mexico for sorcerer, which I feel like is some sort of foreshadowing. I don't know where it's going because I haven't seen past this episode. You, Scott, I'm sure know where this is going.
It's definitely a foreshadowing of how these natural disasters are being caused, because seemingly he's able to predict these things,
Yeah.
There's a whole reason why he's able to predict these things, because he may be causing these things, But I won't say too much more. We'll find out next week.
We will. We then cut to Jamie walking back to Astrid and Victoria, basically saying like, hey, mission was accomplished. Everything is going great. And that was really the entire thing. But then
one thing about this scene is Jamie is a film print for like 10 seconds, and then he suddenly transitions to a real life actor.
Which is an ambitious idea to try and give even more depth to having Jamie like walking up and stuff like that, but like it doesn't work super well when they then cut to Victoria for like 15 seconds as she's like reacting to Jamie slowly walking up to her like to come into frame. It's just weirdly paced.
Yeah, I think it's Barry Letts being way too ambitious with his shots, Like, if he wanted to do that, either shoot in a real life location, but, you'd have to do that on a Sunday, and that's a lot of time out of the actor's time and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, he could, but I think he could have just shot the scene having, just one shot of the wall, and then, there's Jamie coming in, and he just walks up, this is also the scene where we find out that Jamie is going to be a guard, but Victoria's going to stay in the kitchen because maybe she can help clean the dishes or something.
Yeah, because such a really well written character.
In the original script, Victoria was going to be a guard like Jamie, but then it was decided, all the guards have to be men, so the women have nothing else to do, so let's just put them all in the kitchen.
Yeah, classic 2018. We then cut to Astrid hiding underneath like a bridge or a pier or something, and she's chatting with another political defector to Salamander, whose name I don't remember, but they're basically talking like, can we trust what's going on? Like, can we trust the guy in the leather suit who is currently in a meeting with Salamander to work with us. Like this, it's a very nice espionage sort of scene where they're talking like, and then like guards come and walk on top of the bridge above them, and they're like, "Oh my god, are we gonna get caught?" And like, Astrid like pulls out a gun and stuff. It's like it's a very classic way of building tension.
Yeah.
For a scene that is like not a hugely important scene as far as plot goes, but it's a nice little tension building scene before we head into the final scene.
It's also really this scene underneath the bridge is really well shot because you can it's shot in darkness, but you can also see like the reflection of the imaginary water that's going on. There's like waves of light reflecting in their face, which it really works for a scene. There's back projection that doesn't look too well, but it's 1967. The budget isn't quite there yet.
Yeah. But we then cut back to Federin and Salamander, as Salamander is basically being like, "Hey, by the way, here's all the dirt I have on you. I've got all this information on you. I know everything that you've been doing behind my back and stuff like that." And like Federin's like, "Oh my god, are you gonna kill me? Like, what about like all my friends, my family, like everything like that?" And Salamander's like, "No, don't worry. Forget even about this. Is just my insurance on you.
Yeah.
This is so that I can tell you what's gonna happen now, so that you're now like you work for me now. Like it's this amazing bit of like blackmailing and political movement to manipulate Federin into doing what Salamander wants. And it's like the performance here where he's like sitting down at the table and he's like, "You're going to become the new leader of this zone, and you are going to accept this, by the way. Like this is what's happening." It's so well written.
What I love is that Patrick Troughton is playing it kind of intimidating, but also like in a friendly way at the same time.
Yeah.
So you can never really figure out what his true intentions are in this scene. And of course, the guy is terrified by him.
Yeah, it's so well. It's such a cool scene. It really establishes Salamander as like a genuine like threat as well, but like such a different type of threat because he's not like a big bombastic villain. He's just a politician.
Yeah,
like he is this like really good evil politician, or supposedly evil.
The biggest threat of them all, politicians.
Yeah. But then the volcano starts to erupt, just as Salamander predicted, and we get a lot of stock footage of buildings collapsing.
And the show is seemingly implying that we're watching all the stock footage because they pull out a pair of binoculars and we're just watching the entire time. But how can we see this whole thing? Like there's a lot of shots of buildings falling over, trees falling over and shit like that.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's just really good binoculars. But then the current leader of the zone comes running through, and he's like, "Salamander, you've set this up. You're evil. Like you knew this was going to happen because this is espionage. You're the reason these things are blowing up." And Salamander's like, "Nah, I warned you. You didn't do anything. You are a traitor to your own people." And he calls for Bruce to arrest him and take him away. And the guy's like, "You don't think you're getting away with this? Federin's been here the whole time. Like he's gonna defend me and see it." And Salamander's like, "Nah, Federin's going to be the lead witness against you when we take you to court." And then like it ends with like Federin like having to like consider everything that's going on, and like is he going to side with Salamander? Is he going to side with the dude? Who knows? There's a lot of pressure from both sides because we know Federin is working with these like defectors, but Salamander's got this dirt on him.
Yeah, it's a pretty great cliffhanger. He can. It just builds up again the tension, and you can kind of believe the whole situation of this guy is dangerous. Yeah, he can dismantle entire governments basically. It's great stuff.
It's a really well written villain. I really like Salamander as far as a character goes. I think it's such a compelling character for a villain.
And so unique to Doctor Who because he's not an alien; he's just human.
Yeah,
it's so interesting.
It is. And that brings us to the end of part 2 and towards the end of this episode. So, Scott, what did you think about part 1s and part 2s of The Enemy of the World?
I really, really, really enjoy this story as a whole. But these 2 episodes are really strong. They're probably the strongest of the story. Not to say that the next 4 episodes are weak in any way. Episode 3 is probably the weakest coming up. So that's going to be interesting to dive into next week. But yeah, it's a really strong opening for this story.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think it's like last month when we were looking at the Time Meddler, I really enjoyed that as well. I thought that was a really well written out and paced story. It had some problems here and there, as like any first Doctor story does. But as far as I'm super into this one. I think the writing for it is fantastic. I think the character work is really compelling. I'm curious to see where it goes, because it could go completely off the rails and it could become terrible, or it could stay this consistently good. I don't know. It's not a story I was familiar with going into it, so experiencing this all brand new, I'm really, really into it.
For a TV production from the 1960s, it holds up. This episode is, 54 years old? It holds up really well. It grabs your attention. It still holds up really well, and I'm so glad this episode was found, because obviously the impact wouldn't have been as good if you were just listening to the audio and still images. I'm glad this episode was found. For Patrick Troughton's performance alone, that's an excellent performance. He is so good in this episode.
The performances in general from everybody are really, really strong and solid, and even the camera work, minus like the janky projections, some very good camera work, like that helicopter shot in part 1, fantastic.
Probably I would say episode 1 might have the best opening scenes to a classic Doctor Who story ever.
It's a very, very good opening to an episode as well. It immediately sucks you in. It's go, 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 very, very, very fun episode that was. But that does bring us to the end of this podcast. Thank you very much for listening. We will be back next week with The Enemy of the World Part 3 and Part 4. In the meantime, you can find us on Facebook at Who Watches Who, on Twitter at Watches Doctor. The podcast is available in video form. Hello, if you're looking at it on YouTube, in the highest quality it's ever been, because we've changed the way that we're recording our videos, and hopefully it looks better. I have no idea. But that's youtube.com at Who Watches Who Pod, or just search Who Watches Who at YouTube. You should find us pretty quickly. Podcast is also available in audio form wherever you listen to podcasts. There is a lot of links in the description that can take you wherever it is you need to go. You can find me on Twitter at Cloth223. I don't know if I've got anything else I need to plug.
I think so.
No, I think that's everything I need to plug. So thank you very, very much for listening. And a piece of dust just flew by my webcam. That was thank you very, very much for listening, and we will see you again next week. The Enemy of the World, parts 3 and 4. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.